Fernando Pache, can we request you now to start with the invocation? General Fernando Pache.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. Let us bow our heads and put ourselves in the presence of God. Almighty Father, grant us the wisdom to understand when others cannot, the humility to forgive when others will not, the compassion to care when others do not, and the grace to love despite all difficulties and pain. Amen.
Thank you, General Pache, Treasurer of Apcu.
You're welcome,
Now,
sir.
yeah. And now, to give the opening remarks, when we ask Cabinet Secretary and Apcu Chairman Raul Lambino to give the opening remarks. Chairman Lambino.
Thank you, President Jeff. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to our friends in China, more particular those who are in Beijing. Good afternoon also to our friends in the United States, more particular those in Washington, D.C. And good afternoon to all the other friends from Asia who I know they are tuned in this third Apcu Zoom forum. We're very lucky to have with us a very dynamic young leader and who is an expert to foreign policies and international relations. And we are very glad Dr. Romel Badlawi accepted our invitation for him to give this discourse, for us to understand what's going to happen in the world, whatever may be the outcome of the United States elections this coming November. We all know that every president of the United States will come up with its own doctrine. And more often than not, these pronouncements by the US president becomes part of international law, as we have observed in the last 150 years. The Philippines being a country in Southeast Asia that's very important to the interest of the United States, as well as the interest of the other Asian countries, more particularly the economic powers in Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, will always be in such a position. Whoever may be the president of the United States, whether he is a Democrat or a Republican, the Philippines will always be there. It is just noteworthy that there's that saying that when giants will fight or elephants will fight, the rats and the ants must get out. Well, the Philippines cannot do that in the event there is a worsening problem that will crop up between the United States and China. The Philippines cannot move away from this possible conflict. God forbids that the worsening relations between China and the United States will not even become much worse, whoever becomes the next president. And we hope that China and the United States will be able to settle their differences, the policies of the present administration in the United States, or maybe the policies of the next administration of the United States will be more cohesive, coordinative, and cooperative with policies of the present leadership of the Chinese government. We hope and pray that the pandemic that is affecting the whole world will likewise be gone early this or later part this year, if not early next year, when the new administration of in the United States will come in, or when the present administration will continue to be in the reins of power. But whatever it is, we are here in Apcu, the Associations for Philippines-China Understanding, to keep on promoting friendly relations with China and for the Filipino people to understand more about China and the policies of the Chinese government towards Asia and the Philippines. It is very ironic that there is a growing anti-Chinese sentiment being peddled all over the country today, either in the social media or the mainstream media. And I hope that Apcu and our Apcu friends will be able to really inform our public that we are here to support the interest of the Filipino people. And we believe that it is in the best interest of everyone, every Filipino people, to have friendly relations with China, but at the same time also strengthening our relations with the United States. I'm looking forward to hearing the discourse of Professor Banlawe and learn from him what would be the possible consequences of the outcome of these elections in the United States, whether it would be a Democrat or a Republican that's going to be in power. Again, welcome and thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Raul. Before we go on, I'd like to remind everyone that we will be welcoming your questions through the chat box. No? We will be reading your questions to our guest speaker after his presentation. So you can prepare and text in your questions through the chat room. And now, to introduce our guest speaker for this afternoon, we had also invited our guest speaker, and we are now requesting Professor Gabriel Lopez, PhD, also former president of Apcu, to now introduce our guest speaker. Professor Gabi.
Okay. Good afternoon to all our friends. It is my pleasure to introduce a scholar, researcher, co-faculty member, and a student of China and of international terrorism all over the world. Professor Romel Banlawi, PhD, is the president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies, or PACS, and a member of the management board of the World Association for Chinese Studies. He also sits as a member of the board of directors of the China Southeast Asia Research Center on the South China Sea, and is a member of the International Panel of Experts of the Maritime Awareness Project of the National Bureau of Asian Research. He's an adjunct research professor at the National Institute for South China Sea Studies, and also the chairman of the Philippine Institute for Peace, Violence, and Terrorism Research. At the same time, serving as the president of the Philippine Society for Intelligence and Security Studies. Professor Romel is a professorial lecturer at the Department of International Studies of Miriam College. And we were together as co-faculty several decades ago at the National Defense College of the Philippines. He also teaches at De La Salle University, the University of Philippines. He got his Bachelor of Arts and Master of Arts in Political Science from the University of the Philippines and acquired his PhD in International Relations at Jinan University in Guangzhou, China. Just a little quick anecdote. This will be an interesting lecture because in 2017, at the time when President Trump was in Beijing, our chairman emeritus, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, and the small team was also in Beijing, and we noticed a very warm welcome then for President Donald Trump. So without much ado, I'm very happy to introduce my former co-faculty and my compadre, Professor Romel Banlawi.
Thank you very much, Paring Gabi, Dr. Gabi Lopez, and thank you also Chairman Raul Lambino and President Yapinang for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this topic. What I'm going to do this afternoon is to share with you in less than 1 hour what I have learned in more than 30 years. So the topic assigned to me is to discuss US elections and US-China rivalry and its political and security implications for the Philippines. So for this presentation, what I would like to present to you are the state of empirical data about the topic. So we have to get first the evidences and check the facts so that can inform our analysis. Then I will also share with you official declarations and reports so that we will be able to understand state policies, perspectives, and outlooks, and at the same time grapple with the mindset of leaders, both of China and the United States, and how their mindsets are affecting Philippine security. And of course, as an academic, I would like to describe also the status of scholarly literature on the said topic in order to know what kind of knowledge that has been produced so far in this field. And also share with you some sort of theoretical perspectives because theories can explain and make sense of realities, and we want to know what the realities would look like in the future, and theories can provide us very good understanding of that. And we have a saying in the academy that policies not grounded on theories are gambling. So that will be the objective of my presentation today. Now, if you will look at the US election, I am interested to observe US election because of its geopolitical importance, especially how the election of these candidates can shape US-China relations, and of course, how can this relationship affect Philippine security. So if you will look at the two contending parties, the Republican Party headed by Donald Trump and Democratic Party led by Joe Biden, you'll see here a very clear message during their campaigns that Donald Trump is really articulating a very conservative Republican position, which is in fact very hawkish in perspective. And if you will look at Joe Biden, he's articulating a more liberal perspective of domestic and international events and dovish in orientation. And the mere fact that Joe Biden has selected a female and a non-white in his team already gives us a sense of the kind of policy he wants to undertake for the United States of America. And this policy would have tremendous implications not only for US-China relations, but also for the whole world and Philippine security. To date, Joe Biden holds a good lead over Donald Trump in the opinion polls. And if you will look at the opinion survey as early as May 2020, Biden is already leading in the opinion survey with a very small margin. And if you will look at the most updated survey conducted by Monmouth University that was concluded last month, the Democratic Party headed by Joe Biden is still leading the opinion polls, but with a very small and slight margin compared to Donald Trump. And then there's another survey conducted by Morning Consult that Joe Biden is indeed leading the survey, but a very, very small difference with Donald Trump. And if you will look at the survey conducted by Pew Research Center, in fact, this is my favorite polling in the world. They said that Joe Biden is really leading over Donald Trump. Again, compared with other poll survey, very small margin. And but if you will look at the strength of support of voters, Trump is getting stronger support when it comes to the quality of support to the presidential candidates. And this is the survey also conducted last August 25 by Real Clear Politics. You see Biden is leading the survey, and if Biden will sustain the lead by November 3, then it's really telling us that Biden can become the next president of the United States of America. And then I studied the demographics of the two candidates' strength, and you will see that Joe Biden is getting a lot of support from the East Coast and the West Coast, while Donald Trump is getting support from Midwest, especially in areas that are dominated by white people. So in my analysis of US elections, ethnicity will really matter in the outcome of U.S. elections. And if you will look at the ethnographic profile of the strength of these two candidates, you will see that Joe Biden is getting more and more support from Asian, Black, and multi-ethnic voters in the United States. And if you will look at the current survey, more than 30% of eligible voters will be non-white. And in this map, you will see here that Donald Trump is getting a lot of popularity in areas dominated by white people, especially in Oklahoma and Utah and the rest. And Biden is getting a lot of support from New York, California, and other states. So this is another survey indicating that Joe Biden is getting more popularity among voters from the white, Black, Hispanic, and Asian community. So for the 2020 US elections, ethnicity will play a vital role in the outcome of the elections. And where are the battleground states? If you will look at the map, you will see the hexagons, and Texas has a lot of votes, 38 votes. And all these hexagons have higher votes, particularly in New Hampshire, it has four votes. And if you will look at the survey, Donald Trump is leading in areas with many votes, like for example in Texas, Texas, Donald Trump is having a lead there, and in Georgia, Iowa, and North Carolina. Now, if you will see the stronghold of Joe Biden is getting more and more support from voters in New York City, Washington, D.C., California, Nevada, Maryland, Delaware, North and South Carolina, New Hampshire, Arizona, Colorado, Minnesota, New Mexico, Nevada, and even Florida, that made Donald Trump win during the last election. And Donald Trump's strongholds remains to be Oklahoma, Utah, Missouri, Alabama, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Kentucky, where you can see a lot of what we call the white Anglo-Saxons Americans. But still a long way to go to make conclusions. Because if you will look at the gray area, these are the swing states. Swing states can rally either behind Democratic Party or behind the Republican Party. And these swing states are Arizona, Florida, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Okay. If you will compare to the level of confidence, Trump supporters are somewhat more confident of election victory than Biden supporters. And if you will look at the outcome of 2004, 2008, 2012, and 2016 elections, the Republican Party got a lot of support from Midwest, okay? The blue representing West Coast, and the purple, these are the swing states. But if you will look at the result of the 2019 congressional elections, even in the area previously dominated by Republican Party and Democratic Party are already having shades of purple. So as a result of that, it's too early to whether Joe Biden or Donald Trump will win the election. But as of May 2020, Gallup polling found that 31% of Americans identified as Democrats and 25% identified as Republican. And this is the crucial factor that will affect the outcome of US elections. The 40% of voters who claim or describe themselves as independent. So right now, the two candidates are focusing their attentions on getting the support of the independent-minded voters. In other words, Biden versus Trump have close fight in the US elections. However, if you know Alan Lichtman wrote a book, The Keys to the White House. He's a history professor at American University, and he argues that Democrat Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. And since 1984, Dr. Alan Lichtman has correctly predicted the outcome of every US presidential election based on the 13 keys that he developed in the 4 true or false questions. A true answer will earn point for the incumbent, and in this case is Donald Trump, and a false answer can earn points for the challenger, and in this case, Joe Biden. The keys predict that the candidate with the most points will win the election, and based on his analysis of the points of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, okay, he said that Joe Biden is winning in the keys that he provided, but only with 1 point. So it's still very consistent also with the previous poll that the margin is really very, very thin between the two candidates. Now, the outcome of US elections will greatly affect the direction of China-US rivalry, particularly Philippine security. Why? Because US-China relations is the most important bilateral relations in the world today that all of us need to pay attention to. However, Trump's intelligence officials accused China, Russia, and Iran of trying to influence US elections. Even National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien made a very strong statement arguing that China likes to see President Trump lose. And he also made the revelation that the People's Republic of China, being headed by the Communist Party, is expanding its influence efforts against Trump. And why is it that the Republican Party is very much negative about China? It has something to do with their perspective of China. Okay? During the time of President Trump, he initiated this trade war, a very costly trade war. It's $1 trillion trade war. Initially, it was a tariff war. Now, the war already spilled over to many aspects of US-China bilateral relations, and now becoming hotter because of the election season in the United States. And it's something to do with the experience of the United States suffering very huge trade deficit with China. If you look at the yellow graph, that's the import of the United States from China. and at the same time, the red dots indicates the imbalance. So it's really very alarming for the United States, because when it comes to the trade relationship, China is really taking all the leverage, and President Donald Trump initiated this trade war to rectify this figure. Okay. However, FBI director, categorically stated, FBI Director Christopher Wray categorically stated in public, okay, that China is the greatest threat to the United States. Why greatest threat to the United States? Because they are raising the following issues against China. And if the Republican Party under Donald Trump wins the American election, this kind of issues will go on. And what are these issues? They are raising issues against China on intellectual property theft, even accusing Chinese citizens in the United States being involved in the intellectual property theft, then accusing China of unfair trade practices, cyber attacks, even espionage, and then criticizing China's military power development. And later on, I will share with you the recent report of the Department of Defense about the military power of China, and then accusing China of political influence and even diplomatic deception. So they're raising a lot of issues against China. So if the Republican Party wins, it will be very difficult for China to have very good relationship with the United States. And that is not surprising, because as early as December 2017, when Donald Trump assumed his post, they released this national security strategy of the United States of America, where China is described as the biggest security challenge to the United States. Why? Because China is challenging US power, China is challenging US influence, and most importantly, China is challenging American interests. And this is the strategic assumption of the United States about China. In the national security strategy, it says that for decades, US policy was rooted in the belief, and this belief was referring to the belief of the liberals, to the belief of the Democratic Party, and this is the belief. Okay? It was rooted in the belief that support for China's rise and for its integration in the post-war international order, meaning the Second World War, would liberalize China. But this is the take of the Republican Party, especially under the Donald Trump administration, that contrary to our hopes, China expanded its power at the expense of the sovereignty of others. China gathers and exploits data on an unrivaled scale and spreads features of its authoritarian system, including corruption and the use of surveillance. It is building the most capable and well-funded military in the world after our own, meaning the United States. Its nuclear arsenal is growing and diversifying. Part of China's military modernization and economic expansion is due to its access to US innovation economy, including America's world-class university. And this defines, in fact, the strategic outlook of the Republican Party under Donald Trump, okay, about China. And if this continues, really, it will pose problems for the whole world. And that is why Donald Trump initiated this Indo-Pacific strategy. And its latest report, it describes China as being engaged in very huge military modernization and coercive actions. So I will not read this, but to summarize, just accusing China of huge military modernization and coercive actions in many areas of the world, which I will describe later. And then, according to this report, China under the Communist Party is a threat to the free world. It's a threat to free and open Indo-Pacific. And this is again reiterated in the United States strategic approach to the People's Republic of China, being propagated by the US State Department, that China today is challenging China economically and challenging American values, and more importantly, security challenge, which I will discuss later. And this is the latest document coming from the Republican Party. And the content of this document will strongly inform the foreign policy agenda of Trump in the election. Okay? It described China as the biggest threat to continue with U.S. Global leadership. So I encourage you to read this report, Strengthening America and Countering Global Threats, identifying China as the greatest threat to U.S. global interests. And that is why Donald Trump and the Republican Party are pursuing this policy of practically containing China. You know, strategic encirclement of China, mobilizing its allies in the Asia Pacific in order to contain China. In fact, recently, the U.S. State Department, and even supported by the Department of Defense, you know, we're talking about the possibility of creating a NATO-like organization in the Asia Pacific region, or what the United States called Indo-Pacific region, in order to prevent China from dominating the world. So that's the outlook of the Republican Party. And this kind of outlook can already be felt in the South China Sea, where we see increasing tensions between US and China. And US has already conducted a lot of freedom of navigation operations and joint naval exercises in the area. You can also see there also in the Taiwan Strait, where China and United States are quarreling. And US just approved $620 million missile upgrade to improve the military preparedness of Taiwan. And even in the Korean Peninsula, you will see that, you know, Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping are having a lot of difference. And US and South Korea agreed to deploy THAAD missile in the area that, in fact, not being welcomed by China. Even in the coronavirus, you know, the two leaders are involved in what we call blaming game. The coronavirus also became the arena for US-China rivalry. And even in the passing of China's national security law for Hong Kong, you know, we can see here the great difference between China and the United States. And even in Huawei, particularly the introduction of 5G technologies in the United States. So US is using Huawei as an issue against China. Not only that, you know, all these bilateral rivalries already spilled over to visa wars and also consulate war. You know, in what happened in the U.S. Consulate in Chengdu and China's consulate in what area? Houston, yeah, Houston. And even in the issue of TikTok, you know, U.S.-China rivalry can be manifested. So, and also even Confucius Institute, and this is the recent remarks from Pompeo. He wants to see China's Confucius Institute gone from the U.S. by the end of this year. So this kind of geopolitical rivalry between the two major powers are affecting a lot of areas in U.S.-China relationship. Now, the question is, will U.S.-China rivalry lead to a Cold War in the Asia Pacific? Are we now experiencing what we call Cold War Part 2? Considering all these issues where China and the United States are colliding? Well, let's listen to Graham Allison. Graham Allison is an American professor. He just wrote this book, Destined for War. And he said, can America and China escape the Thucydides trap? Okay. And Graham Allison said, as a rapidly ascending China challenges America's accustomed predominance, these two nations risk falling into a deadly trap. And what is this trap? This is the Thucydides trap. If you know the Thucydides trap, Thucydides wrote the book, The Peloponnesian War. And he said that the Peloponnesian War occurred because of the rise of Athens. And according to Thucydides, it was the rise of Athens, which is now China, if you will compare, and the fear that this instilled in Sparta, which can be compared to the United States, that made war inevitable. Now, what begs the question is, will US and China escape this Thucydides trap? So that's the question. And this is the argument of Graham Allison in his book. There are a lot of danger signs when it comes to the outlooks of these two major powers, because these two leaders, you know, President Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump, they are both driven by a common ambition to make their nation great again. You know, America will be a great nation again, and then in the case of China, the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And both identify the nation ruled by the other as the principal obstacle to their dream. And they take pride in their own unique leadership capabilities. And we call this growing exceptionalism, supported by rising ethnocentrism. So we hear the word like American exceptionalism and Chinese exceptionalism. And they also see themselves playing a central role in revitalizing their nation. And they have announced doubting domestic agendas that call for radical changes and have fired up populist nationalist support to drain the swamp of corruption at home and confront attempts by each other to thwart their nation's historic mission. So if you want to know more about the analysis of Graham Allison, I encourage you to read this book, Distinct for War, Can America and China Escape the Thucydides Trap? The question is, if they don't escape the Thucydides Trap, are we gearing up for a World War III? Of course. Let's hear the answer from theories of international relations, because we cannot understand things if we don't base our analysis on theories. Now, right now, I will focus on discussing realism versus liberalism, which in fact reflect the debate between Republican Party and the Democratic Party when it comes to their foreign policy agenda in the US elections. Realism. Realism is anchored on the concept of deterrence theory. Okay? According to this concept, we have to create military power, strengthen our military power to balance each other. And during the Cold War, from 1945, 1990, the balance of power worked between the US and USSR. And bipolarism was in the main foundation of world peace. Bipolarism is good for world peace. Others can choose to be non-aligned. However, the balance of power theory, with the assumption of mutually acquired destruction, can only be applied if the two powers are considered to be established power in competition. However, we are now facing a situation where we have the established power facing a rising power or a challenging state. So the balance of power cannot be used to the current situation. So what can be used? Well, right after the end of the Cold War, there's another theory called hegemonic stability theory. According to this theory, unipolarism is good for world peace. We need a unipolar world order. Why? Because America was confident of its economic supremacy and cultural magnetism, particularly after the collapse of the former Soviet Union, its main rival during the Cold War. But something happened a decade after, 9/11. 9/11 revealed the vulnerability of American power. And US made the realization that it needs to cooperate with others to address global threats, particularly international terrorism. And US made the realization that US cannot maintain world peace alone. And unipolar Praetorianism could not be sustained by the United States. So the theory of liberalism became popular. Okay? Create a liberal world, a multipolar world where nations will cooperate, everybody will collaborate in order to address issues of common interest. However, there is a caveat for the promotion of this multipolar world. This is based on democratic peace theory, meaning we can only have a peaceful multipolar world if all sovereign states are democratic states. So the United States says that we will create a multipolar world, but we need to promote democracy worldwide. Because a democratic world is a peaceful world. And this is based on the argument of Immanuel Kant in his book, Perpetual Peace, that the world will only be peaceful if the world is democratic. And this kind of democratic world is a liberal democratic world. And therefore, authoritarian states are threats to world peace, referring to China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and others. So what's in it in democracy that will guarantee peace? According to democratic peace theory, if the state is democracy, the propensity to go to war is less because you need to get the people's support or congressional support. You have to get the support of the people. But in authoritarian states, the will of the leader can make war happen. So they are advocating that if you want a multipolar world, the world must be composed of democratic states. And non-democratic states are threats to the democratic world. So that's a democratic peace theory. Now, will the rise of China threats to world peace? According to democratic peace theory, well, China is a threat to world peace because China is not a well, they call it a non-democratic state. Okay. And now China is challenging U.S. global leadership. According to the 2014 Pew Research survey, 31% of the respondents think that China will eventually replace the United States, while 50% already think that China has already replaced the United States, and there are still 34% believing that China will never replace the United States. But if you will combine those respondents who think that China will eventually replace the United States and China's already replaced the United States, they are optimistic that China will replace the United States eventually. So, will the China order be good to the whole world? And according to Phil Wang in his book, The China Order, you know, China's Confucian-based outlook can challenge US-led liberal legalism. So that's the problem now, because we are now live in a world, in a liberal world created by the United States, and China's Confucian legalistic outlook is challenging this US Western-led liberal legalism. And because of that, to allay fear of the world that China will be a threat to the world, many Chinese scholars, and this is my favorite Chinese scholar, Zhang Weijian, you know, they wrote several articles describing that China will rise peacefully. China will not be a threat to the whole world because China is a peaceful nation. And China does not seek world hegemony. China just wants to coexist with others, you know, the policy of peaceful coexistence. China seeks harmonious world. So compared with other major powers, China will not rise aggressively. China will rise peacefully because China is a peaceful nation. These are based on the arguments of many Chinese scholars. However, Organsky, as early as 1967, advanced this power transition theory. This is a theory about the cyclical nature of war in relations to the power in international relations. And this is his argument. War between two competing powers can occur if there is a power parity between the established power and the rising power. According to the balance of power theory, the balance of power is good for world peace. But the assumption is these two major powers must be established powers. But it's different when you are facing a rising power. And according to the power transition theory, when power reaches its parity between the established and the rising power, then it's not very good to the whole world. If the challenger surpasses the dominant power and the challenger is dissatisfied with its current power, it's not good for the whole world. There's another two books that I just read recently, the books written by Stacy Goddard and Corey Shakey. They said that, you know, there will be peaceful transition to power if the established power accepts the leadership of the rising power. And it happened during the transition to power between Great Britain and the United States. You know, Great Britain accepted, you know, the leadership of the United States as a rising power. Now, what begs the question is, will the US accept the rise of China? If the United States will not accept the rise of China, will the transition to power be peaceful or violent? That remains to be seen. Now, let's go back to Graham Allison in his book. He said, in 12 out of 16 past cases of power transition, in which a rising power has confronted a ruling power, the result has been bloodshed. The question is, can we prevent US and China to go into war in this period of power transition? According to the theory of realism, yes, we can prevent China if we will contain China. And that's why we need this Indo-Pacific strategy. And that is now being advanced by the Republican Party, being advanced by President Donald Trump in his campaign speeches in the elections. And US is even mobilizing the support of Quad, you know, Quad, Australia, India, Japan, okay, in order to contain China. It's only through containment that we will prevent China from rising. Because apparently the US wants to maintain its global leadership, and the US is not ready to accept to transfer this global leadership to somebody else, particularly China. And the theory of realism advances and supports alliance formation against the rising power. And this is the latest tweet of Dr. Mark Esper, the Secretary of Defense of the United States. He says that as a communist China moves at least double the size of its nuclear stockpile, modernizing our nuclear force and maintaining readiness is essential to a free and open Indo-Pacific region. And that kind of perspective is in fact produced and even reproduced by Donald Trump in his campaign speeches. But the liberalism is saying that, you know, we'll suffer security dilemma if we will continue to do that. You know, we need to cooperate to promote world peace. We need to establish and set rules and norms for cooperation. Into 2019, as early as 2019, a group of Chinese and American scholars sat together in order to find common grounds for US-China cooperation because of the assumption that historically, the accession of a great power has resulted in armed conflict. And in order to prevent this armed conflict to happen between the two major powers, especially the collision between the established power and the rising power, there's a need to establish consensus on potentially contentious issues and elaborate areas where the two nations can work together to achieve common goals. And I think Donald Trump should reread this book again. But I'm sure that Joe Biden, you know, is informed about the contents of this book. But this is the sad fact according to John Mersheimer. John Mersheimer is a author of the book, The Tragedy of Great Power Politics. And this is his lamentation. The sad fact is that international politics has always been a ruthless and dangerous business, and it is likely to remain that way. A state's potential power is based on the size of its population and the level of its wealth. Therefore, China has the potential to be considerably more powerful than even the United States. And what are the facts are telling us? You know, let's check the facts. According to the projection made by the World Bank and even the International Monetary Fund and even collaborated by other economists, that by 2013 it's being forecasted that China will become the #1, you know, economy in the whole world, because US is falling economically and China is surpassing the United States economically. And even in the area of foreign currency reserve, China is #1, okay, 3.6 trillion US dollars, followed by Japan, almost half, you know, 1.2 trillion. And the United States is not even in the top 10 of countries with the most number of foreign reserve. And that's the reason why US is falling, because of what Paul Kennedy wrote in 1987, The Rise and Fall of Great Power. You know, US is now suffering the phenomenon of what we call imperial overstretch. You know, the United States so committed abroad that its economy could no longer sustain it. So it's now suffering from imperial overstretch. And this imperial overstretch can lead to the fall of great power. And Farid Zakaria already made an early warning as early as 2008 that American predominance is rapidly fading because of the rapid rise of the rest. We are now experiencing what he called the post-American world. Why? Because the tallest building in the world is now in Dubai. The biggest factory, of course, is China. The largest oil refinery is India. The largest investment fund in the world is Abu Dhabi. And the largest Ferris wheel in the world is in Singapore. You know, the rise of others is making building the post-American world. China is, of course, the world's factory. Although the pandemic has slowed down economic activities of China, but based on projection, you know, China has already overcome the United States in terms of purchasing power parity, meaning China can buy more than the United States now. Okay. And then Martin Jakes, in his book, When China Rules the World, he said that China now is a crucial economic player in the world. And the only thing that China is lacking is the gap between economic power and political power. Now, will China rule the world? In my opinion, China is not yet ruling. but is already leading the world. And if you will look at the membership of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, China is leading this country. Okay, this is a manifestation of China's capability to take global leadership or to take international leadership. And if you will look at also in terms of global merchandise trade, China is leading in areas. If you will see the orange area there, these are the areas already led by China, not technically ruled, but led by China. And the blue areas are areas dominated by the United States. If you will see from this map, that China's leadership is growing compared to the United States. And this is based on the current survey conducted by the CSIS Southeast Asia. You know, I just got this last August 30. It says that the following countries will hold the most political power and influence in Southeast Asia, and China is listed to be the #1 country that will lead Southeast Asia in the years to come. But if you will compare China and United States military power, of course, you know, China is still dwarfed when it comes to the nuclear military power. Though China has the fastest growing military in the world, it will take decades, in fact, to surpass the United States in absolute sense. If you will look at their nuclear power capability, China remains a nuclear power midget, still very small. Okay, but however, China is already ranking #2 among the powers, among the powers with nuclear weapons. So that's gonna change in the years to come. But compared to the United States, China is still very small. And when it comes to ASB power capability, I'm referring to air-sea power capability, or air-sea battle power capability. US is still leading, but China is rapidly catching up. Okay. Even in the recent report of the DOD, this was just published 2 days ago, the military and security developments involving the People's Republic of China, China is already ahead of the US in the following areas. So just read this book, you will see that the US has admitted that China is leading already in other areas of military development. And that is creating security anxieties right now in the United States. And even in terms of military assets, naval assets, particularly those deployed in the South China Sea. US is still the #1, but China is rapidly developing. Okay? In fact, already in terms of ownership of patrol vessels, China has more patrol vessels compared to China now, compared to the US now, although US continues to have more aircraft carriers, but China only one. China is attempting to develop their own indigenous aircraft carrier, but there's now a thinking that they don't need this kind of aircraft carriers because they have permanent aircraft carriers already in the Spratlys with land reclamation activities there in what we call artificial islands. So in terms of military power, US is still leading, but China is improving rapidly. And in terms of China's defense budget, despite of changes in their GDP, China's defense budget continues to increase through the years. Okay. And even the conventional strike capabilities of China, this is the fear of the United States that China's reach in the Indo-Pacific region is getting stronger. But, okay, according to DOD report, China's national strategy is in fact creating fear in the world because it is strategy to achieve the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by 2029, okay, can lead to China's predominance in the future. So this is what the DOD report is telling us. But right now, it's being contested by many scholars. So just have to read the arguments of Chinese scholars challenging the report of the United States. But what we see here now, that US and China are now involved in what I call deep contest for global leadership. China has the vision of this one belt, one road, while the United States has this vision of Indo-Pacific world. Okay. And if you will look at the sphere of influence of US and China, China's sphere of influence is, of course, there's no doubt, in North Korea, South China Sea, mainland Southeast Asia, and Pakistan. And US sphere of influence is South Korea, Japan, and Oceania. Neutral, presumably, the maritime South Asia, and minus Pakistan. In other words, they are competing in our region for international leadership. And according to Amitabh Acharya, with the fall of US unipolar moment, we are now facing a multiplex world, and we are now having the myth of liberal hegemony, and there are now creations of different worlds based on regions, called regional worlds. And one of the most important regions of the world will be the Asia Pacific region, where US and China are in fact having intense rivalry. And according to Michael Pillsbury in his book, China has this secret strategy to replace America as the global superpower. And this secret strategy is based on his concept of 100 years of marathon. So by 2049, that's the projection that China will become the global superpower, replacing the United States. Whether we believe him or not, that's the argument of Michael Pillsbury. And his argument is in fact informing the thinking of the Republican Party and many hawkish in the United States. Okay. But of course, China has this dream. China has a dream, a great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And he says this: completing the building of a moderately prosperous society when the party celebrates its 100th birthday in 2021, which is next year. So we have to watch out, you know. And the building of a prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and modernized socialist country when the new China marks its 100th anniversary in 2049. You know, is the fear of Michael Pillsbury happening? Let's see. According to China, especially in various speeches of President Xi Jinping, and I would like to thank my friend from the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies, Father Ari, who gave me the book of President Xi Jinping, Volume 3, The Governance of China. Well, I read a chapter on China's diplomacy. President Xi Jinping reiterated his concept of building harmonious world based on Belt and Road, that will forge partnership with all countries, create a security architecture that is fair, just, and promote development for all, that will also encourage inter-civilizational exchange, and also build, you know, eco-friendly leadership that will put the interest of mother nation above the interest of the society. That is the vision. And he has this vision of a community of shared future for mankind. Is this vision already telling us that China is already preparing for global leadership? And according to President Xi Jinping, we should build partnership in which countries treat each other as equals, engage in extensive consultation, and enhance mutual understanding. The principle of sovereign equality underpins the Charter of the United Nations, and the future of the world must be shaped by all countries. In other words, China has a global vision through the thinking of President Xi Jinping, a community of shared future of mankind. Is this the sign of China's preparedness to take the global leadership by 2049? Look at this project, the Belt and Road. Belt and Road Initiative is based on China's concept of peaceful development for all. Although the current pandemic is affecting the implementation of Belt and Road, but you know, China is catching up. Okay? And China has this concept of a world order that is different from the United States and Western countries. Will this China's view of world order challenge the current liberal order? And where is China's view of world order coming from? I just would like to share with you my presentation in the World Conference of Chinese Studies, where I talk about China's geopolitical role in the Asia Pacific from ancient to contemporary times. And I discussed China's tributary system, and China's tributary system is now informing the global perspective of China right now. And this China's tributary system is in fact a very benign system, because that does not necessarily mean political subjugation to China, because those countries respecting the leadership of China is in fact receiving protection also from China. China's concept of tributary system was generally peaceful, and this is based on historical arguments, you know. And China's political influence during the tributary period was largely non-interventionist, as tributary states maintained their autonomy and independence, and tributary states could get military assistance from China if requested. And this is the concept of China's tributary system. You know that. And Philippines during those ancient times, sent tributes to China. You know, the king killing of Butuan as early as 1001 already conducted the first tributary mission to China, followed by the Sultan of Sulu. Okay, and we are part of, in fact, China's ancient maps, and I thank the Kaisa for producing this map for us, so we can have a better understanding of our ancient relationship with China. Okay, but China's tributary system was challenged by Westphalian system during the 17th century, and since then, the Westphalian system that we are currently experiencing right now has dominated the world. And this was the decline of China's geopolitical influence, and also China suffered what they call centuries of humiliation. And China's tributary system was in fact contained by US-led San Francisco system, a network of American bilateral alliances in the Asia Pacific, and this became very useful during the Cold War. And Donald Trump, under the Republican Party, wants to revive this kind of alliance system, a NATO-like alliance system, in order to contain China. And this is the argument of Aaron Freiberg, A Contest for Supremacy. And listen, he made this argument that in the 21st century, leading the world needs a great mastery of Asia. Asia's regional order shaped the world order of the current century. Those who lead Asia will lead the world. Now, who has a better mastery of Asia? US or China? Let's see, let's discuss that later on. A lot of literature already published that, you know, will the 21st century belong to China? With the China rising, will the West be able to cope? Will China's rise make the 20th century peaceful or turbulent? System right now, the US-led Westphalian system and the China-led tributary system. And that can affect the future of world order, particularly in the post-pandemic world. In the post-pandemic world, you know, China is recovering. US is not yet recovering. And in China, there are pandemic winners that contributed to the bulk of China's increase in profits, national profits. Okay. China tech companies are in fact benefiting from the pandemic. You know, the Alibaba, the Tencent, the JD.com, and they are all what we call the pandemic winners. And these pandemic winners are currently driving the post-pandemic economic recovery of China faster than the rest of the world. There has also been increase in demand for China laptops, screening, and servers. Computers and electronic devices are star performers, you know, and these are now driving China's economic recovery. And if you will look at the stock also in China, it's recovering from lowest point in March. It's now improving constantly. If China can sustain this kind of improvement, then it can really recover fast by next year. And according to a study published by Wall Street Journal, China is the first major economy to return to growth since coronavirus pandemic. Okay. And this is giving China great advantage compared with the United States. How China is preparing its economy for a future where the US isn't the center of global demand. And according to this study, China will likely become the world's largest economy in a few years, and it's preparing itself for major shifts in international trade. And right now, China is in fact benefiting from face mask diplomacy, and being anticipated that China will benefit from vaccine diplomacy in the post-pandemic world. Now, In this situation, there are arguments that that US needs China in a post-pandemic recovery. Otherwise, the United States will continuously fall economically. At the same time, while that is happening in the United States, Xi Jinping, in his book, The Governance of, made a and repeatedly said in various speeches of President Xi Jinping, where he emphasizes that China and the US have more to gain from cooperation and more to lose from competition. And even Zhang Zhengji, director of the Office of Foreign Affairs of the Communist Party of China, stressed last August 7th that China and the US fighting against each other would spell great disaster, not only against each other, but also to the rest of the world. In other words, from these speeches of two great leaders of China, China is making a strong signal not only to the United States, but also to the whole world that China will not attempt to compete with the United States. In fact, China wants cooperation with the United States. So that's the argument of the Chinese leaders. How about the argument of American thinkers? Listen to Henry Kissinger in his book, World Order, and another book on China. He repeated this in his two best-selling books. According to Henry Kissinger, if China and America are in conflict, then the whole world will be divided. The question is, will China de-escalate its current conflict with the US? With the current rhetorics of Donald Trump, there's no sign of the escalation. But with the speeches of Chinese leaders like President Xi Jinping, I think China is willing to take unilateral actions in order to de-escalate bilateral conflicts with the United States. Because China is pursuing what it calls China's peaceful path for development. And even in the China's defense white paper, China is only preparing for defensive purposes. And this is my summary of these two documents. This is my summary. China seeks peace. China wants world peace, but China is able to go to war. China seeks no trouble. This is I attended the meeting 2 days ago, organized by China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they reiterated this in the speech of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that China seeks no trouble, but is not scared of trouble. So we have to watch out the sentiments. This is the newly published book, also 3 days ago, published by the National Bureau of Asian Research, An Emerging China-Centric Order. What is the profile or the feature of an emerging China-centric order? Are we prepared for a China-centric order? Can we accept a China-centric order? Are we willing to live in building this China-centric order? That begs the question. Now, I have more, few more slides. Right now, in my opinion, China and the United States are saber-rattling maybe because of US elections. But if they continue doing this saber-rattling attitude, the risk of armed conflict is currently high. But you know, I am born optimistic. I always think positive, except having a coronavirus. But the prospect for peace is in fact much higher than the risk of armed conflict. Why? Because China is willing to de-escalate bilateral conflicts with the United States. Now, what will be the implication for the Philippines? This is the implication. If Joe Biden wins, of course, let's expect that he will reverse damaging Trump actions, particularly on trade war, particularly on isolationist foreign policy and others. However, Joe Biden's emphasis on human rights and the rule of law can generate political pressure on Duterte's government. And Duterte and even beyond will be compelled to put economic aid, military assistance, and US leadership and US-China relations will also become major foreign policy issues for our own elections in 2020. Biden's emphasis on the need to promote interstate cooperation, however, and his concept of open trade and multilateralism can de-escalate current tensions with China. And that is why China is more favorable to have Joe Biden wins, because Joe Biden in many of his speeches is open to idea of preparing trade relations with China and strengthening multilateral relations among countries. Unless China hardening its positions on international issues that are in perennial conflicts with the US. And what are these? You know, human rights concerns in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and Tibet, security challenges in Taiwan, Korean Peninsula, and the South China Sea, and even China's relationship with non-liberal states like Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So these will be areas where Joe Biden will have conflict with China. Now, if Trump is re-elected, what will happen? Well, of course, Donald Trump will reaffirm its hawkish, mercantilist, and isolationist position. He will pursue the strategic containment of China by strengthening alliances in the Asia-Pacific, building a NATO-like order in the Indo-Pacific. It can worsen US-China rivalry, and this will be very difficult for China to handle. It will also give a foreign policy dilemma for the United States, for China, and even for the Philippines, because we will put in a situation of taking sides. We will have a taking side dilemma. Are we going to take the side of the United States or take the sides of China? However, domestic approval of the US does not mean acceptance of Trump policy towards the Philippines. But China will look for a more innovative approach to deal with the Philippines, being an American ally, because China considers the Philippines a very important country strategically. And therefore, the Philippines needs to anticipate how this new approach will develop if it wants effective foreign policy approach towards China while maintaining security relationship with the United States. Now, in conclusion, I want you to read these books. You know, as a scholar, I want books because books can give us a lot of insights on current realities. Diplomacy is small states and alliances, small states in international relations. How small state can deal with major powers in international system. All these books will tell you how. These books, big states in the world of powers, big states in international system. You know, you don't need to gather secret intelligence to understand current realities. You just have to go to the library and read the classics, and they will tell you the answers. According to this book, there are 3 strategic options for small states on how to deal with major powers. Either you bandwagon, you balance, or you hedge. These are the 3 things that that can inform states' relationship with major power. Either you bandwagon, you balance, or you hedge. Bandwagon meaning you join the rising power, or balancing, you join the established power and balance the rising power. You know, placing bets on both worlds. And that's been my advocacy since I became a scholar on this topic. You know, we have to pursue what we call a middling strategy, meaning balancing our relationship with the 2 major powers, particularly US and China. We have this middling strategy to make the best of both worlds. According to the liberal view, it means friendly to all, enemy to none, which is an independent foreign policy. But according to realism, it's just an acceptance of the reality that there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies in international politics, only permanent interests. So if you want to balance our relationship with the United States and China, the main driver of this balancing act will be our national interest. But of course, this will face some risk for the Philippines. On the part of China, China can question us, are you sincere as a friend? But the United States as an ally will ask a question, are you loyal as an ally? So we need to sharpen our skill in balancing to advance our national interest. And as my conclusion, I want to share my piece that I published in China Daily, that Manila has a role in averting China-US conflict because we are at the middle. We have a role in averting China-US conflict. And how can we play this role? Again, I wrote another piece published by ICAS, a strategy of small states with great powers. And this is my argument. Small states and great powers have different survival instinct amidst international anarchy. Realist theory of international relations contends that great powers seek their survival by balancing each other, but small states, by virtue of their inherent vulnerability in the anarchic international system, find their survival by forging relationship with great powers, balancing each other. So that's my question. Now, this is the time. This is my latest commentary I published last August 29, and this is my argument. This is the time for China to show its strong-willed leadership in promoting peace, security, and stability in the South China Sea by unilaterally pursuing practical measures that can de-escalate tensions and prevent the risk of accidents and misunderstandings. And for the last slide, this is my final conclusion. Pay attention to constructivism in international relations. This is the third major theories in international relations. According to this theory, the nature of interstate relations is the product of social learning and experiences that create norms of international behavior. Being a friend or an enemy is not a given affair, but a socially constructed relationship. War and peace, conflict and cooperation, enmity and amity, and connecting and distancing among nations are what states make of it. Now, will US and China are what states make of it? With that note, I encourage you to change our mindset about China, okay? Because China is more than a communist society that we know of. China is highly diverse society. Are we willing to live with China? According to constructivism, our relationship is a product of our experience. If we have positive experiences with China, then that will be good for the whole world. But if we have negative experiences with China, China will have a problem leading the world. Is China a friend or a foe? It depends on your perspective. But if you consider China as a friend, there's nothing to be scared about. However, if you consider China as a foe, then you have to be scared about, because China is in fact rapidly ascending as a major power. With that note, I thank you for your patience. I thank you for bearing with me. Now you can ask questions or clarification or comments. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Badlawi. Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of some friends of Apcu here. We have Senator Coco Pimentel, Chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We have Commissioner Gwen Gana, Ambassador Wilfredo Villacorta, General Ed Adan, Congressman Eric Taniada, and Congressman Edmond Reyes. We have Cynthia Liang of the Confucius Institute, and former Apcu Director Ramon Casiple. And now we'll proceed to the open forum. We will give some time for people to put in their questions. And in the meantime, a question is, do you think it is possible for China to be less assertive in the South China Sea, as many Filipinos feel insulted, no, by Chinese assertiveness, especially in Spratleys and Scarborough Shoal? Dr. Badlawi.
Okay, regarding the South China Sea, first, China does not have a uniform view of the South China Sea. China is composed also of hardline officials, moderate officials, you know, and softline officials. But this is what we know in the area. China is willing to negotiate with claimants in the South China Sea. And in fact, as we speak today, China and members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations have in fact resumed their discussions on the code of conduct in the South China Sea in order to establish a norm of peaceful behavior in the South China Sea in order to prevent any violent conflicts in the area. Now, regarding China's assertive position, if you will look at things from the perspective of China, they consider their actions as just appropriate because of their existing claims. and not blaming others also for their aggressive action. But if you will look at my own analysis of the situation, if you will look at the realities in Southeast Asia, you know, if there is a country that is aggressive really in the area, for me, it's not China, it's Vietnam. Vietnam has occupied a lot of facilities in the Spratleys. Vietnam is also doing a lot of military and paramilitary activities, but we're not really raising big issues about it. Why? Because Vietnam is a small power. That's why this is my argument that China is getting the attention of the whole world because China is the only major power claimant in the South China Sea. And therefore, China has a greater responsibility in the maintenance of peace and stability in the area.
Oh my
So,
God.
Okay. Another sticking point between the US and China is the Taiwan issue. No? China considers Taiwan as part of its territory and is willing to go to war to recover Taiwan in the next 1, 2, and definitely before 2049. Would you care to comment on this?
in fact, in my opinion, China's position on Taiwan is stronger than in the South China Sea because in Taiwan, China's position is very strong. You know, they will not allow China's independence. They will not allow Taiwan to be separated from mainland. They will not allow any dismemberment of Taiwan from the People's Republic of China. So for me, if there's any issue that will encourage China to go to war, it's not the South China Sea, but it's Taiwan. Taiwan is in fact more problematic than the South China Sea for me. Because in the South China Sea, China is willing to negotiate, willing to compromise. But when it comes to Taiwan, no compromise. China will not compromise on Taiwan issue.
Okay. It's the strategy of the US not to allow any dominant player to arise out of the Eurasian landmass, similar to what the United States did in World War I to Kaiser Germany, to Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, and the Imperial Japan. Do you think the United States and China has already fallen into the Thucydides trap?
Not yet, but close to that. If Trump continues, then the danger of falling into this trap is becoming more and more possible. That is why we need preventive measures to avoid that kind of situation because it will affect the whole world. That um, very alarming for its agenda. Will the rest of the world support the United States? And now, you know, if you will look at U.S. attempt to form the alliance of
We have some technical difficulty. Dr. Balawi, are you there? Dr. Balawi? Regan, is Dr. Balawi still there?
He's not here po, but I already messaged him personally to enter the meeting again. He's
Okay.
now admitting.
Okay, good. Banawi, welcome back.
Oh,
Dr. Banawi, maybe you can unmute yourself. Dr. Banawi, can you unmute yourself? I think you're on mute. Even is Dr. Banawi out again?
He's here again, sir.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Because my kids are also having their online classes. Go ahead.
I guess he's explaining his internet connection problems.
Yeah. His kids are having internet online classes.
He's entering again.
Okay.
That my connection is having a problem.
Now,
Go ahead.
okay, now we can hear you.
Sorry. It's my connection.
Okay. Maybe you'd like to continue?
Yes, please continue. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, we have a question here from Rick Saludo. What do you think will be China's reaction if, let's say, the next president will allow the EDCA agreement to push through and allow U.S. forces to come in with placement of missiles?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Regarding EDCA, the implementation, the termination of the although right now it's being suspended, the termination is being suspended. There's a continuing implementation of Sorry again, it's my internet connection. As far as the United States is concerned, they whoever will be the president, whether it's Joe Biden or Trump, they want and if the BFA will determine type of BFA also, and even some American officials, they still value our alliance with the United States still.
Raven, nawala si Dr. Banlawi.
Trying to connect again, sir.
Sorry. I hope this is not a conspiracy something. Go ahead. So whether Joe Biden or Trump, they want defense alliance to continue with the Philippines. That's the U.S. position, whether Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And they want the implementation of EDCA. They want a mutual defense treaty.
Okay, one question from Dr. William Emmanuel Yu. Given the current political climate and that Trump is going all in with his anti-China rhetoric, do you feel that US will ramp up its enforcement of its Clean Network initiative? In the near term, what does this mean for the telcos and banks in the Philippines, which needs to connect to US networks and providers? Do you think the Clean Network will go away if Biden wins? Thank you. Dr. Banlawi.
Sorry, I lost you for.
Yeah. What do you think will Biden do if he wins about the Clean Network? What does this mean for the telcos and banks in the Philippines, which needs to connect to the US networks and providers?
Come again, sorry.
Do you feel the US will ramp up its enforcement of its Clean Network initiative?
Can I interject? I think no, Jeffrey, your echo is too strong. We cannot understand.
Yes, that's why. Yeah, that's why
Sorry.
I'm not getting it properly.
Whatever, no. Try to masyado malakas ang echo mo eh. We cannot understand
Okay.
you.
Dr. Balawi, what do you think will the US do about its ramping up of the enforcement of the Clean Network Initiative? Can you hear me? Dr. Balawi, can you guys hear me? Raven, can you hear me?
Jeffrey, napuputol-putol ka eh. Oo. And then yung echo mo is too strong.
On my end po, I can hear you po.
Clear naman?
Yes po, sa akin po.
Okay.
Okay.
I am just not sure sa
Yeah, what initiative is that?
The Clean Network Initiative.
Yes, I
Dr. Balawi, can you hear me?
He's out of the meeting again, sir.
Okay. I think we really have a problem with the
He's
okay.
trying to enter again.
Uh,
He's trying to enter again.
Yes, I hope you don't mind if I just put out my video to have a better connection. Go ahead. Hello.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. I need to put out my video to have a better connection. Go ahead.
Now, there's a question about the Clean Network because I think the US wants to block out Chinese companies from dealing
Yeah.
with the US financial network and US like banning WeChat and TikTok. Can you comment on this?
Yes, if Donald Trump wins the election, of course, the United States will going to pursue that. But as long as Duterte is the president, then as you see, President Duterte is not following the U.S. sanctions. You see, but if the next president will not follow Duterte's approach now, then let's see. But right now, Duterte is not in fact following U.S. sanctions. And his inclination is to continuously deal with China in order to continue their projects in the Philippines. So we know already the position of Duterte on that. But what we don't know is will this kind of position will be sustained after Duterte? That remains to be seen.
Okay.
And if Joe
have-
Biden will become the next president, I think that's going to change because the Biden's policy is to improve trade policy, trade relationship with China.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question from Rick Saludo. Future wars are likely to be waged in cyberspace. How do China and the US compare in cyber warfare and security capability?
Well, as far as my understanding of China's cyber capability is concerned, I think it's already having an edge against US. China's cyber capability is in fact getting more and more sophisticated, and China is becoming more and more capable of operating in the cyberspace. And that is why we need an international law that will regulate the use of the cyberspace. Right now, we have the maritime space, we have the land space, but there are two areas where international legal regimes are not yet clear: the cyberspace and the use of the cyberspace and the use of the outer space. And in my understanding, China is already having greater leverage compared to the United States, especially in the area of 5G technologies. And that is why the United States is criticizing China for its cyber activities. And right now, I'm reading the reaction of Australia, and I think Australia is also raising concern about that. because compared to the United States, when it comes to cyber capability, China's cyber capability is improving drastically. Okay. Faster than the United States.
Okay, another question from Congressman Edmond Reyes Jr. China is set up for the long term. Its president is not limited by 2 4-year terms. There is continuity and stability of purpose. The U.S. democratic system is not stable and is vulnerable to change every 4 years. Structurally, how can you beat an opponent who is there for the long term and is more focused? Would you care to comment?
In fact, that is the major advantage of China's political system. Because with China's political system, with one-party leadership, political stability is stronger than in the United States. So therefore, they can make very strong vision. Okay? And right now, with President Xi Jinping being the president for life, then the policy on his side to really pursue his global vision. But in the United States, you know, it depends on the result of the election. So China's advantage is its political system when it comes to long-term strategic planning. And I think, based on my understanding of China, China is really determined to accomplish its long-term vision, and under the leadership of President Xi Jinping is harnessing all its resources to really put forward its global agenda of creating a community of shared future for mankind. That is now, in fact, the global vision of President Xi Jinping. And when it comes to security policy, in fact, President Xi Jinping has repeated this many times, that it wants to create an international system that is based on the concept of cooperative security, comprehensive security, and more importantly, sustainable security. Okay. And this concept of security, he calls the new security concept under President Jinping, aims to support President Xi Jinping's vision of creating a community of shared future for mankind. Trump does not have that kind of global vision except to rescue the liberal world. And Joe Biden does not have that kind of global vision. In fact, Joe Biden is willing to cooperate with China in creating a new world order. But Donald Trump wants to maintain the current liberal world order, which is in fact being challenged now by China's new concept of world order. So I think that is the major advantage of China, China's political system. Okay. But of course, if you believe in democratic peace theory, you know, China will be a threat to the democratic world. But based on my understanding of the facts, even the democratic world are in fact relating with China. You know, Germany is relating with China now. Great Britain is relating with China now. France has a very good relationship with China now. Okay. We don't know whether the United States will get support from other major powers in its intention to strategically contain China. So that remains to be seen. But I think the only strong supporter of the United States when it comes to its strategic containment policy is Japan. But Australia and even India, they are quite ambivalent when it comes to their positions. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a question from Wilson Lee Flores. Is it possible, and how can we in the Philippines insulate or depoliticize our foreign policy for long-term stability regarding Philippine-China ties, Philippine-USA ties, from the vagaries and uncertainties of Philippine domestic political shifts every 6 years of a new president?
In fact, that's the main problem for China, our 6-year presidential term. That is why China is now currently making a lot of studies to anticipate what will happen after Duterte. So they want to maximize the 2 remaining terms of Duterte to institutionalize some things in their bilateral relationship. So that's a major problem. But when it comes to our relationship with the United States, that's a less of a problem because U.S. relationship with the Philippines is highly institutionalized because of the Mutual Defense Treaty. So whether Duterte will have whether the next president will carry the agenda of Duterte or not, okay, U.S. Will have no problem because U.S.-China relations is in fact established on strong institutional ground. But our relationship with China right now is like building a castle in the sun. It's very, very fragile and lots of uncertainties. But when it comes to the US, our bilateral relationships have some clarities, although subject to the approaches of the president. So China is really having a terrible problem when it comes to sustaining these friendly bilateral ties with the Philippines.
Okay. Another question from Wilson Flores. How do you assess the chance of a walk the dog scenario or accident in the South China Sea in 2 months before November election? Is this a big possibility since Trump is still lagging behind in all surveys? How do you assess chances of a limited military clash or other escalations of American hostile acts versus China?
Well, there is one conspiracy theory going on stating that US really wants something to happen. You know, US wants something to happen in the South China Sea, like armed conflict there, because you know when US is in war, it can mobilize the popular support, and at the same time, it can trigger economic activities because of armed sales. But that's a conspiracy theory. But if we talk about the current efforts now being conducted by China, China is now heavily involved in a lot of activities that aim to promote preventive diplomacy in the South China Sea. And in fact, when I attended this meeting 2 days ago, hosted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, the main agenda now of China is to really make a conclusion of the code of conduct in the South China Sea, and in order to promote peace, friendship, and stability in that area, and at the same time discuss areas to reduce the risk of armed conflicts in the South China Sea and pursue more efforts to prevent armed conflicts in the South China Sea. Because I think China does not want any armed conflicts to happen in that area. China is not ready for that kind of thing to happen because it will affect its domestic economic stability, especially in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think China will exert greater unilateral efforts to really de-escalate its current conflict with United States, and will not dance to the tune of the United States of increasing military risk in the South China Sea. But the problem in Taiwan is another matter. But in the South China Sea, China is exerting a lot of efforts to really pursue preventive diplomacy in the area.
Okay. A question from Austin Ong. The U.S. spends more than $740 billion in its military budget in a year, like this year, bigger than China and Russia and the next 6 countries combined. How would you advise Asian countries to manage the U.S. intentions and role under the new normal?
In absolute terms, U.S. defense budget is still bigger than China and even the rest of the world. But when it comes to relative terms, China's defense budget is in fact the fastest in the whole world right now. But even under the Democratic Party, I don't think U.S. will slow down its allocation for defense budget. Because if you will compare with China, if the truth be known, American military assets are in fact getting older, you know, vintage Cold War. They need to upgrade their military assets, and to do that, U.S. needs to allocate higher defense budget to do that. But China's military assets now are in fact new, cyber capable, okay, state of the art, you know, because China is a new entrant when it comes to military power capability. So that's the main concern of the United States. So whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, I think the Department of Defense will continuously lobby for an increase in defense budget in order to upgrade American military capabilities and make it at par in the 21st century.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banlawi. It's almost 5 o'clock. Now we would like to call on our Vice Chairman, Sixto Benedicto, to give the closing remarks.
Hi, everybody. As Vice Chairman of Apcu, I would like to officially close this interesting, productive, and perceptive online forum by primarily extending highest gratitude to the people who played different roles for making this event a successful one. To our honorable guest speaker, Dr. Romel Banlawi, together with the members of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies, to our notable invitees, guests from different organizations, friends from the media, my co-officials from Apcu, and to everyone who willingly graced this event. This forum aimed to discuss U.S. elections and China-U.S. rivalry, political and security implications for the Philippines, which can be described in a very critical manner. However, upon hearing the sentiments delivered by our guest speaker, I am sure that we are all able to gather information on how we can correctly respond and formulate our perspectives to the implications that are bound to affect the Philippines. Allow me to share my framed ideas relevant to the topic. Initially, whatever the implications are, the Philippines must pursue a policy that will best serve the national interest, be it in terms of political and security matters. The strategies and plans should be anchored to the beneficial effects that the Philippines could acquire. This may sound very cliche and underrated, but this highly reiterated notion should always be dealt with. Further, as the country aid the national interest, bilateral matters should be handled in a very diplomatic manner. Generally, this can be advanced through the promotion of cooperation and settling of conflicts. Mentioning all these points, I would like to once again express our sincerest appreciation to all of you who took part for forwarding the aim of Apcu to promote people diplomacy between the countries through cultural, academic, and visit exchanges through Apcu Forum, which entails a high-level dialogue and forum platform for bilateral policy issues. Long live the friendship and cooperation between the Philippines and other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sixto. Thank you, everyone. We just want to inform everyone that our next forum will be on September 25, Friday at 2 p.m. And we will have no less than President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, who will be talking about where Philippines-China relations are headed for. And also, we will have Chinese Ambassador Huang Xilien, who will be talking about China's 71 years of achievement and its impact on Philippine-Chinese trade and economic relations. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We look forward to seeing all of you again on September 25 for our next Apcu Forum. Thank you. and good day to everyone.
Thank you. Chairman.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Thanks
you.
to all.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about
Thank
some
you, Dr.
technical.
Malawi. Thank you. It's
Thank you very
okay.
much. Yeah,
Professor
thank
Ronald,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Jeff. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
For a very enlightening lecture.
Yeah. The forum is getting bigger and wider in its
Thank you very much.
coverage and
Congratulations.
participation. Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rahul. Nice seeing you.
Raul,
Yeah,
Willie
you,
Villarama.
Yeah, nice seeing
Raul,
you.
Willie Villarama. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you,
Galing mo.
Congressman.
Galing mo.
Oh,
Thank you,
Okay.
Chairman,
Happy
and
birthday.
our President.
you also.
May birthday dyan
Thank
ah.
you,
Happy
birthday.
birthday.
Raul, kamusta po?
Happy birthday. Walang blowout eh. Ah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Sinong birthday ba?
Happy birthday.
Ikaw,
Happy birthday
mo.
si Dr. Henry Lim. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
At saka congratulations sa mga Rice Award niya. Yun, masagana 300 niya.
Yes, congratulations, President
Tinutulungan ng
Henry.
mga farmer.
Kailangan magpakape.
Oh,
Dapat
Delivery
birthday
na lang.
cake.
Delivery po.
Delivery.
Congratulations,
by drone,
Professor
by drone, by
Pantawi.
drone.
Magaling magsalita. Nakakatuwa.
mag-celebrate tayo.
Oo.
Pero kailan tangkilin natin sariling bigas natin. Huwag mga
Oo.
puro itang bibili natin para
Hindi,
tulungan.
drop delivery.
Dr. Lim, napakagaling si Professor Banlawi magsalita. Akala ko, alam ko na lahat. Marami pa pala ako kailangan matutunan.
Yeah.
Magaling.
Tama ka, Wilson. Ako rin, matagal na rin
Ayun.
ako dyan ng
Attorney,
politics.
mas magaling, mas sikat ata anak niya sa inyo ah. Yung Vice Governor. Congratulations ha.
Medyo.
Congratulations sir.
Mana sa nanay. Ang galing.
Oo, congratulations. Pag may anak na magaling. Congratulations ha.
Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for your greetings.
Happy birthday, Dr. Lim.
Maluwag-luwag na pasyal ka sa Pangasinan para sa ating mga farmers. Alam mo, wala akong ginawa na dito pag nandito ako. Hindi, nagsasakat. Nagtanim ako ng palay.
Hindi. Tulungan kita.
Yeah.
Asan ka, Raul?
Nasa Pangasinan ako ngayon.
Sa Magaldan tayo.
Mangaldan ako ngayon.
Anong town?
Mangaldan.
Professor Banlawi, anong probinsya niyo, Professor Banlawi?
Pangasinan po ako. Vice Governor namin ang anak ni Chairman Lambino.
Wow. Saan ka, Professor Banlawi? Saan ka sa Pangasinan?
Sa Bautista, hometown ng Governor.
Yes.
Ay, grabe, kababayan niyo.
Opo. Doon po ako nag-elementary at nag-high school. Bautista,
Professor,
Pangasinan
alam ko matalino kayo, pero ang galing niyo pala mag-explain. Nakakatuwa.
Naku, salamat po. Sorry po sa technical issues. Mukhang may problema ako. But was
Yung
able
buong
to
session,
recover
parang 5 minuto natapos na kasi ang galing niya magsalita.
Galing.
Ang daming libre na compress ni Dr. Banlawi. Siguro may 15
Thank you for
libro.
inviting. President Jeffrey Nang, thank you for inviting. Akala ko marami na akong alam. Nung nakinig ako dito, marami ako natutunan.
Hindi, ang laki, gandang exciting lahat ng slides niya eh. Ang ganda eh.
Yes.
I will share my slides sa